This episode of The War Room is brought to you by C4 Energy. Enter full Reptile at checkout for 30% off. And make sure you check out their new Smart Energy range. Okay, let's get into this fight. Derek Brunson versus Darren Till. Okay. So, Derek Brunson has a rather chaotic style, or had a rather chaotic style. He's been in the UFC for a long time. He's in his earlier days. He had this anxious kind of hanging back and waiting and a bit uncertain, and about 30 seconds goes by and then he sprints at his opponent and he starts firing left hands over and over again until something connects. And, he blasted through, a decent chunk of the division. Let me just pull up his record. I should have been more organized here. He blasted through like 5 or 6 guys. I think he stopped 5 guys in a 6-fight win streak early on in his career. And he was doing it because he was overwhelming guys. He was sprinting at them because he's got the confidence that he's got wrestling to fall back upon. So if anybody level changes, they're into his game. And his striking's chaotic. His wrestling's quite chaotic as well. But it suits him because especially in MMA where people have got good takedown defense, and where in MMA people aren't necessarily going to engage back in the wrestling and you have to force them to wrestle with you. That's where Derek Brunson's chaotic style comes into play. But when he was first in the UFC, so where are we? Came over from Strikeforce. He was 9-0, lost to Kendall Grove, lost to Jacare, and then he signed his UFC contract or transferred over to the UFC. Fought Chris Lieben in his debut, and then rear naked choked Brian Houston. But that was a head kick that started that. It was 48 seconds. Cracked him with a head kick, chased him down, jumped on his back, and took a rear naked choke. We'll stick a pin in that because we might come back to that, because I think there's a possibility of a rear naked choke in this fight if Derek Brunson's going to get a finish. Just focus on his striking. So here we are. So it was a 5-fight win streak, decision over Lorenz Larkin, and then he stopped Ed Herman, Sam Alvey, Ron Carnero, and Uriah Hall all in the first round. And then he went into the Rob Whittaker fight, and I was Octagon side for this, and I remember watching this fight firsthand and just thinking to myself, at some point he's going to run onto something that's going to knock him out because he's wide open. The rush tends to back people up because of the intensity of it, and because he's throwing that left hand over and over again. They also know that he's got a decent wrestling game, so he might level change. And because he's at such a low level when he's sprinting, it's difficult for people to judge him. They often find themselves backtracking before they're overwhelmed with shots. He did exactly the same thing against Rob Whittaker. It just didn't work out, but it was close. I mean, he had Whittaker hurt in that fight. But then against Anderson Silva, he just kind of froze up a little bit, and he didn't, maybe it was because he was coming off his first loss in the UFC in a while. But the point is, the chaotic style of his striking worked really well for him in his early days. But as soon as his confidence was shot, as soon as there was a possibility he was going to run onto something nasty, he stopped doing it. We had another couple of first round finishers, Dan Kelly, but that was a very, very fast left hand that didn't really require a great deal of a sprint. And same thing with Lyoto Machida, kind of caught him as he was drifting towards the left hand and then followed up on the floor. That short, brief run of first round stoppages for Derek Brunson stopped as soon as he lost to Whittaker. And I think since he's now moved to Sanford MMA, we've seen a refinement in his striking game. But I'm not necessarily sure that's a good thing in this fight, because Darren Till's a high-level Thai boxer. So the problem that we've got is that we've got Derek Brunson, who was dangerous because he was chaotic. He doesn't move in the same patterns that a normal good striker would. He throws his left hand over and over again from all different kinds of angles, and then he can crash into range and back it up with wrestling. But you think to the Sam Alvey fight or the Ed Herman fight, he was like pushing off and hitting him again and getting tied up and pushing off, and most of his opponents are not knocked out with the first shot. They're trying to cling on to him and they're rocked and wobbling, and that chaos is what tends to overwhelm them. since he started to refine his striking, since he started to kind of hang back a little bit and try and pick his shots, and he started to use his left kick a bit more, now I feel like he's more vulnerable to a high-level striker like Darren Till. I feel like the chaotic style would suit him because he's, first of all, Till's been out for 14 months. So it might be worth him starting fast. It might be worth him jumping on Till straight away. He also has the wrestling to back it up, and we've seen that a lot more in his recent fights. I mean, you think what he did to Edmund Shabazian, he was able to take him down and ground him and beat him up. I mean, he got 2 stoppages in that fight. It was same thing with Kevin Holland. Like, we're seeing a new development in his game, and I think it's a good development in his grappling sense, but for the time being, not necessarily in his striking. Give him another 2 years, maybe a bit longer, and his striking will come up to a level where now that improvement has taken hold and now it's a part of his game. But it's not quite yet. And with someone like Darren Till in front of you, who, he's so relaxed, he's so loose, he's so confident, he bounces heavy on that lead leg, and he constantly shocks people into doing stuff that they don't want to do. Shocks people into either throwing counters or level changing or covering, turning their head away, whatever it is. He uses that kind of shock tactic to make people reactive so he can read what their natural reaction is. Like, if you think back to the first round against Rob Whittaker, he was doing that all the way through. He was stomping on the lead foot as if he was coming into attack with a real ferocity. And Whittaker was reacting he kept throwing out his left hook. And then Darren obviously read that and was able to step inside and crack him with the rear elbow on the chin. But that was all set up from those feints. And with someone like Brunson, who's still not quite sure of himself in the striking range, if he's standing in that range, playing technical with Darren Till, he's going to be biting to those things all the time because that's what Darren's so good at. And the more he plays that game, the more vulnerable he's going to be. The chaotic side of his game, which, although I think it will be more valuable if that's for that to be his approach in striking, I don't know whether his confidence is there in that anymore. I don't think he feels like he has that invincibility that he did when he ran through, those 4 guys in the first round. I think his confidence was really shaken by Whittaker, and you saw it in the Anderson Silva fight, and he also struggled to ground that fight as well. I don't think that the right thing for him to do is to hang out and kickbox with Darren Till. I think if he's able to close distance quickly and chaotically, I think it'll be safer for him. Throw that left hand, get into range, and then grab a hold of a limb or the body. Because as I was saying, the chaotic style of his striking, when that transfers over into his grappling, it's actually quite beneficial because of the chaos, he's able to adapt and change and move. And if you watch his striking attacks, that's what he does as well. Although it's a bit wild, he's in the moment and he's seeing where his target is. And because he's only got one thing to focus on, he just keeps going over and over again until something lands. In the wrestling exchanges, once he's got a hold of somebody, if he decides they're going to the floor, he'll keep working until he's broken them down. And the repetitive nature of this, as we saw against Ian Heinisch, as we saw against Shabazian, as we saw against Elias Theodorou, even better. When people start to get taken down over and over again, there's room to scramble to get back to their feet. They often give their back. And this is where Brunson can start working over and over again. He can, he can keep dragging people down to the mat. And he's also very good out in the center as well. He doesn't require being up against the fence to take people down. I think that's a real benefit for him because then people have to turn to give their back to get back to their feet if they're in the center. You don't have that safety net of the fence to use up against the shoulder to try and scrape them off. You have to have a real technical stand-up or even a reversal to stand up if you're out in the center. So level changing under Darren Till's attacks is probably the smartest thing for Brunson to do. I just kind of emptied my brain. I've been up for about 24 hours, so I have to apologize if I'm a bit scatty today. I'm going to go through my list just to make sure I'm hitting everything I want to say. So Derek Brunson's probably going to start with the rush. If he doesn't, then he's going to play technical and then he's vulnerable. Darren Till will use that feint to try and draw him out and try and see what his main attacks are and then work his counters. So that's where Brunson will start level changing. And level changing under Darren Till's attack might be benefited by Brunson looking uncertain on the feet. Because if he starts to be reactive and starts to feint, Till might feel more confident to come crashing in with a big elbow or a big left hand. The difference in the striking style as well between the two of them is that Darren Tills is far more considered. Like, he thinks about how he's delivering his shots. Brunson thinks about the target, and he doesn't really worry too much about how the shot's being thrown. The placement of his feet, the placement of his guard, of his balance, it all goes out the window because he's entirely focused on one thing. Darren will play with people and he'll set them up. If you think that the Dalby fight, cracks him in the body, feints the body, hits him with the head, feints the body, hits him in the head with the elbow, then feints the elbow, comes with the uppercut. It's like he's having a conversation with them and they don't understand the language that he's speaking. And Dalby's a good fighter, a good striker as well, has a background in striking. I just don't think that Derek Brunson can play that game with Darren Till. I think it would be really risky. He has to use his rush and his chaos and his momentum and power to overwhelm Till, and at the very least get himself into grappling range where he can get the fight to the floor. Now, Darren Till's got good takedown defense. We've seen that over and over again in these fights. I think it's 82% takedown defense. I'll look at the stats in a minute. But, he's on the mat all the time. He's got two guys either side of him. He's got Mike Grundy, who's smaller and faster and a very high-level wrestler. And then he's got Tom Aspinall, who's had a lifetime of grappling and is a heavyweight. So he's being pushed from both sides when it comes to grappling. Both of those guys are going to be trying to take him down on a daily basis, I would imagine. And he's working against two very different body types and approaches, both of which are going to make him very good. When we've seen people try and take him down in the past, like Whitaker tried to take him down a few times, and obviously Gastelum, he's got good habits where he's building frames and he's posting and he's stripping grips, and like he thinks very quickly in that moment. Or rather, let me correct myself. He doesn't think quickly, he reacts quickly because he's well trained. And that allows him to be far more present in the fight because all of those things are automatic for him, and it allows him to get straight back to his range. So instead of thinking about his own defense, he's thinking about where is his next avenue for attack, which might be, elbows or knees at close range. Darren doesn't want this fight on the floor. It would be an absolute waste of his energy. It would be an unnecessary risk to tangle with Derek Brunson down there. I'm not saying that in a grappling match that Brunson would necessarily be able to sub Till, because I think he is a good grappler, and the time we've seen him submitted against Tyron Woodley, he was already rocked in that circumstance, which changes things. That might change things in this fight. If Brunson's not able to hurt him and drop him, but he's able to rock him, he might be able to get him to the floor and make him vulnerable, and that's where the back attacks come into play. But Darren, really, we know what he wants to do. He wants to keep us in striking range. He wants to scare the hell out of Brunson, keep feinting him, and get him to react so he can sting him and counter him and knock him out. I think Brunson would be smart to close this fight down and not wait too much and try and play technical kickboxing in the process. Get in close, get the fight to the floor, and then, put Darren in that cycle in the center of the cage where he's got to scramble back to his feet, potentially give his back every time, potentially give the next takedown. And then, when fatigue starts to set in, this is a 5-round fight, of course. That's when rear naked choke starts sliding into place, when people get lazy on their get-ups and stuff. I will also say one thing on Brunson before I leave it. I do like the fact that he's not always trying to finish with submissions. He's very good at cooking people. He's very good at beating them up on the floor. We saw it against Elias Theodorou. He's in top position. He's raining down shots. Theodorou turned and gave his back. Brunson would try and sink in a rear naked choke and not get it, but then would take top position and start beating him up again. That's what I like to see from a good MMA grappler, is someone that knows when to engage in a submission, but also when to abandon it and keep hitting the person. Because chasing submissions that aren't going to come off is just as much a waste of your energy as it is your opponent's. And if that's your goal, then fair enough, but it's much better to beat him up, in my opinion. And he just took the life out of Shabazian. That elbow that he landed at the end of the second round, that was the end of the fight for me. didn't really need to continue after that point. But the point stands is, he's got great ground and pound, which can also encourage people to turn away and give their back, especially if they're tired, especially if they've been cooked for a couple of rounds and they've taken a beating. I think Darren's going to have to defend some takedowns in this fight. And I think if he watches the Adesanya fight, he'll find a few ways to cause Brunson some real problems. Because this is where his confidence becomes shaken, is if he can't take the fight to the floor. I said I was not going to say anything more, but I'm going to say one more thing. I'm going to have a drink first. Sometimes when we get this, where we go, oh, well, two really good grapplers, it turns out to be a kickboxing match. Or two really good kickboxers, it turns out to be a grappling match. Sometimes a wrestler will come into a fight against a striker and not try and take them down because they don't want in their own head to be proven that they can't take the person down. It's almost like they have a safety net there. So while ever he's on the feet and he's not tried to take Till down, he's not failed. If he shoots 3 times in the first round and fails all 3 times and Till makes it look easy, his confidence to take Darren Till down in the second round is shot. And that's a play of confidence. That's a mind game thing. Till can force Brunson to work, can force Brunson to try and take him down. I'm not saying that's the smart route to go, but the point still stands. If Brunson tries to take Till down and he's not able to, then that's a big part of his game that he would be relying on for confidence. And if he knows that's not there, then he has to kickbox. And he's probably already aware that he doesn't want to do that against Till. He's probably confident that if he cracks him on the chin, he can hurt him because he's seen it from Woodley and from Masvidal. But at the same time, Woodley's got some serious horsepower, and Masvidal set that up beautifully. It's the chaos that Derek Brunson brings in. I should have a counter for how many times I've said that word. It is what it is, though. There's not a great deal of refinement in his striking game, but that's one of the reasons why it's so dangerous. Someone that we talk about from time to time on the podcast because he looks like Ollie is Keith Jardine. And like Keith was he's a lovely guy. He's got an ugly style though. It's not a, you don't watch him fight and go, oh, that's the style that I want for my MMA career, because it's not pleasant to watch. It's kind of awkward and there's a weird rhythm to it. And, like Vanderlei Silva's a good example. Not particularly technical as far as Muay Thai goes. I mean, you watch him on the pads, and it's not the prettiest thing in the world. It's the opposite end of the spectrum from Floyd Mayweather, but it's effective because of the intensity and the intention within it. And crashing forward and landing big power. Anybody above 155, 170 weight classes is dangerous with that kind of momentum behind them, shall we say. Okay, let me have a quick look at the stats and then we'll wrap it. So obviously Darren Till's only had 2 fights at middleweight. Brunson 22-7. He's been around for a while. He has a lower average fight time, but that's because he gets his work done quicker. Darren's a bit more calculated, a bit more considered. 1-inch height advantage, 3-inch reach advantage for Derek Brunson, both southpaws, which means that lead leg is going to be vulnerable for Darren Till whenever he steps heavy. Darren does like to step heavy on that lead leg and throw the left hand or the left elbow, so that's going to be something he's got to watch out for, because Brunson does have a quick level change, and he doesn't need to get the first takedown. As I said, he will adapt. Higher striking for Brunson, slightly higher striking accuracy, but then you've got to think that's because he's been able to put people in positions where they can't move to get hit. Slightly higher striking defense for Till. He does have good head movement, but that being said, if someone's traveling at the right speed, they will connect. Average takedowns, obviously Brunson's way ahead there. Over 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. 94% takedown defense for Brunson. 82% takedown defense for Till, but only a 33% accuracy for Brunson, which it doesn't look like a lot, but I actually think that's quite similar to Khabib's. I think he's around 31% success. The reason why that's good is because there's that 70% failure is 70% of effort that his opponents had to give. And over a 25-minute fight, it does make a difference. So the tenacity of his approach will help him. I think I've said everything. Apologies if that's been a bit rambly. I've been up all night watching weird boxing matches and stuff, but I hope some of that made sense. Go and check out the full breakdown on the BT Sport YouTube channel, and there's some clips and stuff in there, and let us know what you think. And I'll catch you next time.